Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Wednesday, December 11th. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far today. This is episode 444 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. Make sure to please like and subscribe for those tuning in on YouTube. Appreciate all of your support as always. Of course, appreciate you all tuning in on all the different audio podcast platforms. It is another week, another episode, another Wednesday, halfway through the week, getting closer to, I think we can all kind of name this one the Tank Bowl on Sunday afternoon down in Jacksonville. Jets, Jaguars, 2, 3, and 10 teams. We'll obviously talk more about that as the week goes on. But in today's episode, we're going to be breaking down a whole lot of general manager candidates for the New York Jets. We broke a couple down a couple weeks ago, but today, over the last couple days, we've got some new reports. We've got an Athletic article that lists 15 names that the New York Jets could potentially target. So we're going to take a look at 16 names today. We're going to dive into a few more than others of targets that the New York Jets could potentially hire to be their next GM once these 4 games are up. Of course, the search is led by former Jets GM Mike Tannenbaum and former Vikings longtime GM Rick Spielman of the 33rd team to assist them with this search. We'll break down the latest reports and the latest names linked to the New York Jets general manager position today. As always, though, before we begin, let me tell you about our podcast partners, starting with our friends over at BetUS. Since we're talking about general managers today, let's take a look at the odds for the next New York Jets GM job, courtesy of BetUS. Ray Agnew at plus 300, Ian Cunningham at plus 350, Mike Borgonzi at plus 400, Ed Dodds at plus 500, and Alec Halaby at plus 550. If you want to get in on that action or any of the other sports betting action, use my link in the description of this video to get a 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. Also, our friends over at SeatGeek, if you're looking to get out to any NFL games, any NBA, NHL, college basketball, you name it, SeatGeek has it. Plays, concerts, shows. You know the drill for the daily listeners. Use promo code Bubs on Sports for $20 off your first purchase and get yourself out to some awesome events. And, of course, our friends over at Huga House. You want to get any of their awesome collection of hats, including some new arrivals that are going very fast. Use promo code Bubs for 15% off and get yourself some awesome Huga House swag. So here we go. Another week, another day, another episode here on the podcast. As I mentioned, episode 444, 4's all across the board there. And today we're going to take a look at some more general manager candidates here for the New York Jets. So over the last couple of days, there's been some more reporting. There's been some more news about potential general manager candidates for the New York Jets. And we'll start with the single candidate, and then we'll kind of take a look at the long list of candidates that was sent out by Zach Rosenblatt and The Athletic of 15 candidates to keep an eye on for the New York Jets. Obviously, for the Jets here as they look for the new GM here once the clock hits triple zeros on the 2024 campaign. Now, before we begin with that, I want to get to an ESPN report that was sent out a little bit ago, ESPN Plus, Jeremy Fowler report. In the article, it had some notes, it had some news on where the Jets currently stand right now with the Jets GM, with their GM position, and they also had a name that I want to talk about as a potential addition to add to this vacancy. So here's the first part of the report. The Jets have begun preliminary work on general manager candidates, including the evaluation of those not currently in the league. That makes sense since clubs are free to talk with candidates not currently employed in the NFL, but must wait until after the regular season to submit interview requests for those employed by other teams. Former Tennessee Titans general manager John Robinson, for example, is someone I expect the Jets to research. The Titans were 66-43 during his tenure from 2016 to 2022. Phil Savage, who joined the Jets in 2019, is serving as the interim general manager here for the rest of the season. Now, the report goes on longer. The Jets will continue wide-ranging searches for their open GM and head coaching positions, with former league executives Mike Tannenbaum and Rick Spielman aiding the search. It's unclear whether New York will hire a coach or general manager first, though some around the league suspect it will start at GM. I would expect that as well, and I think that's probably the smart way to go about it. And there's been a lot of discussions about this. The only coach I would probably bring in here, first from a head coaching perspective, that I would trust to maybe hire a GM as well and bring in his own people and kind of run the organization for a little bit, if they really want that guy, would be Mike Vrabel. Other than that, the Jets have got to go GM first. He's got to like the hire. He's got to want the hire at head coach, and then they can really work their way top down, go GM, head coach brings in his staff, so on and so forth, and you get moving with the offseason, you get moving with the new regime. So we'll see how the Jets go about it. I think it will be GM first and then head coach. And I want to get to that first name there. I want to talk about John Robinson before we talk about anybody else, because John Robinson is a name that I think if you're a Jet fan, could be an intriguing name a little bit here. Right in that article, it mentioned the 66-43 record. And here's some background. He spent about 6.5 seasons with the Titans. He was surprisingly fired midway through his final season with the team, which was kind of a shocker. So in total, during his time there, he went 66-43. If you're counting the games after he got fired, it was 66-48, but was shockingly fired when they were 7-5 in 2022. Got fired on December 6th of that year. Late in the season, they were in the playoff race. They fired him, and they were 7-5 at that point, which was all surprising this happened. And then they ended up losing 5 straight. I'm not saying that was the reason why, but either way, it kind of sent shockwaves, whatever the case may be. Anyway, he spent 7 seasons with Tennessee. In those 7 seasons, while he held this position, 66-43, 66-48 if you're counting the 5 games afterwards, after he was fired. Either way, though, 4 playoff appearances in his 7 seasons, 1 conference championship appearance, 3-4 as a whole in the postseason. Again, if you're counting the moment he got fired, he was 7-5. So while he held the general manager position in Tennessee, he had a winning season in every single year. Went 9-7 his first 4 years in a row, then went 11-5 in 2020, went 12-5 in 2021, and was 7-5 prior to getting fired in 2022. So essentially was there for 6.5 years. And while he was there, every season, team had a winning record when he was in place, including 4 playoff appearances, 3 playoff wins, and 1 trip to the conference title game in 2020 or 2019 rather. Now, I think what makes John Robinson a really interesting candidate as well is he hired Vrabel in 2019. His first 2 years was with Malarkey. He hired Vrabel in 2018. They worked together the rest of the way there. So that makes things interesting. They've already got a connection. If the Jets hire John Robinson, does that potentially lure Vrabel to the Jets because they work together? They have a history with each other. And I think that's also could be super important with the Jets because you want a general manager and a head coach that potentially kind of have like a previous relationship with each other. You know, McCagnon, Bowles, they had no previous relationship. Douglas, Saleh, they never really crossed paths. If you, in an ideal world, you could potentially get 2 guys that maybe cross paths or at least have a lot of experience, at least have both previously held a head coach and general manager position where they're both well respected, both have a lot of experience. That would be the case here with John Robinson. So a name definitely to look for. It feels like to this report, the Jets might be interested. It feels like a name, especially if the Jets maybe want to get Vrabel here. Could they just kind of package the two together? It's something to watch. He's obviously a guy with experience. He's got successful experience. And to me, that's what I want most in the next head coach and next general manager is a guy with ideally a guy that held the general manager position before, had some sort of success, and ideally a guy that held a head coach position before and had some form of success one way or another. So there's John Robinson. Now, The Athletic released 15 candidates. I'm not going to sit here and dissect every single 15 candidates. We will talk about each of them a little bit. I'll break down some more than others. Some of them are repeat guys that we've talked about already a lot on this podcast. I had an episode up about 2.5, 3 weeks ago now, probably, about, I think I had 6 general manager candidates that the New York Jets could look into. I think 3 or 4 of them were on the Athletics 15 GM list. So some of these guys we've already talked a ton about on the pod. We'll go through some of them here. Ray Agnew, assistant GM of the Lions. He's a name to, of course, look for. He's probably, in terms of like big name, in terms of like first-time GM, he's probably the top guy. Him, Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, they're all coming from Detroit. Those, in terms of if the Jets are going to go a first-time GM, first-time coordinator route, it's probably going to come from Detroit. It could be Ray Agnew as their GM. Maybe their maybe their head coach becomes Aaron Glenn. Maybe it's a package deal where they bring both of them in here, Ben Johnson, whatever the case may be. I don't see that happening. But Ray Agnew is probably the top first-time GM that I think will get hired in this cycle. Whether or not it's with Jets, only time will tell. He's been the assistant GM since 2021, was brought in with Brad Holmes within a winning organization. Who knows? Maybe the Jets find their next Brad Holmes here. Hopefully Agnew has kind of seen what it's like to have a winning organization, what it's like to have the proper GM, have the proper coach. The Lions have hit on a ton of draft picks, something that the Jets will need to start doing if they really want to turn this thing around. He was the Rams director of pro personnel as well from 2017 to 2020. Now has been with the Lions ever since. Has some playing background. Was a 10th overall pick in 1990 by the Patriots. So has been around the game for a while. And one of the rising stars in a way from a general manager perspective coming from a winning organization. The other name on the list, Mike Borgonzi. Talk about winning organizations. He comes from one of those. We've talked about him a lot. Assistant GM with the Chiefs. He's been with them forever. He's been with Kansas City since 2009 in a variety of different roles. Didn't become the assistant GM since 2021. Either way, though, he's been there for over a decade. He has been a part of multiple playoff appearances, multiple division titles, multiple Super Bowl trips, 3 Super Bowls back to back, going for a three-peat. This guy has seen a ton of winning happening around him. If you're talking about poaching a guy from the top winning organization, the Chiefs would be that right now. Certainly a candidate that could potentially get a lot of Jets fans excited if he can bring some of that winning, some of that background, what he has seen there over to New York. Definitely a name to look for. A guy we've talked about a lot, of course. Other name on this list that we've previously talked about, Ian Cunningham, assistant GM currently with the Bears. Now, I know the Bears are a little bit of a mess. Fired Eberflus, but front office-wise, Ryan Poles, everyone's going to stay put. He worked under Ozzie Newsome in Baltimore from 2008 from 2016 in a personal assistant role. Then he was an area scout. Then went to Philly from 2017 to 2021. So 2 organizations that have seen a lot of winning. He's been to 2 Super Bowls. He's won both of them. One with Baltimore, the one with Philly. So, has been a part of this Bears rebuild so far. It's been a little choppy, but I would say the Bears are much closer than the Jets. I think the Bears are, with Caleb Williams and with a young quarterback in play that has showed promise. I think they are a favorable destination that a Ben Johnson or somebody like that would want to go to. And I think their destination that really is just one good offensive mind away from getting the most out of Caleb Williams and turning the season around, or turning their core kind of their thing, the way things have been around for Chicago. So Cunningham could be a name to look for. John Dorsey, also on this list. Talked about Dorsey a lot. I really like John Dorsey just because he's got previous experience. And to me, that stumps all. Like that, to me, if you've got previous experience, if it's good experience. There is one guy on this list that has previous experience that I don't know if I would be totally on board with, just because of the way it went down in his first general manager opportunity. We'll get to him here in a little bit, but we know about Dorsey. Was with Kansas City from 2013 to 2017, 43-21. Then went to the Browns, helped them turn things around, 2017 to 2019. Was with the Eagles, helped them, was with the Lions. Since he's now a senior personal executive for them, he has helped Detroit. So it feels like was general manager from 2013 to 2019. Now has kind of taken a step back with Philly, has helped them, went to Detroit, helped them. Feels like now for Dorsey could be an opportunity for him to, at this point in his career, maybe get one last shot as a general manager, one last big gig to turn an organization around. Has taken a couple years off. Obviously hasn't been a GM since 2019. Now could be time for him to jump back into it. Experience, has a pretty solid resume from a Chiefs perspective, help the Browns kind of turn things around for them. So, and I know Browns are obviously having a bad year, and he wasn't a part of the whole Watson stuff, but they did make the playoffs a couple times since, got their had the 1 year with Baker. They were in a lot better shape over the last couple years than they are now. Like this year's been awful, but they've been in better shape recently because of some of those years. So those are the names that we've already spoke on in those previous videos. Now, another name we've talked about already, not a ton, but we brought it up, was Dawn Aponte. She is currently the NFL Chief Administrator of Football Operations, and she would actually be the first female GM in NFL history. So well respected around the league. For a while now, people have talked about Dawn Aponte as a potential name, as a potential general manager candidate for the Jets. Not even just for the Jets, for the NFL, for any NFL team, but especially now for the Jets with this opening. She was with the Jets previously from 1994 to 2005. And the reason I bring that up is she witnessed the Kotite transition into the Parcells year and kind of saw how it all unfolded. You went from one of the worst cultures, a losing culture, just to put it simply, to a winning culture, and a culture that not only set up those 3 years in under Parcells, the AFC championship run, in 98, not only just that, but also set up Herm Edwards for some success. Mangini got to the playoffs in his first year. Rex Ryan, his first 2 seasons, went to the playoffs, went to the, the conference championship games. So really, after Parcells left, there was a culture in place where the Jets, other coaches kind of just walked right into it. She saw that. She was a part of it, right? 94 to 2005. She was there during Kotite, there during Parcells, there post Parcells. She kind of witnessed that change. How much does that carry over? Does that benefit her? Don't benefit her? Whatever the case may be. But that's what the Jets need. We all keep saying it. That's what the Jets need. They need a guy that's going to come in here, even if it's only for 3 to 4 years. They don't have to be here for 8, 9 years. Even if it's for like 3, 4 seasons. They need them to come in here, lay a culture down, reset this culture, build a foundation, and set yourself up where over the next 10 years, you can be a team that consistently makes the playoffs. Be a team that's at least competitive. Maybe not making the playoffs, but at least is going to be in the hunt year in and year out. At least is going to be a team that's going to be well coached, right? We saw that after Parcells. They had some years under Herm. They had, the 1 year under Mangini. They would have had another one under Mangini if Favre never got hurt. They had the 2 years with Rex, and now it's all falling apart. They need that again. They need that culture that can kind of sustain them for a little bit, where you're making the playoffs, you're being, you are competitive, all that stuff. So Don Aponte is a name to look for. Now, probably the top name on this list, and a name that I really haven't thought about much, but certainly a name that I think now that has been brought up, I would totally be on board with, is Thomas Dimitroff, former Falcons general manager. Now, as I mentioned in the ESPN article, they can talk to general managers that are not currently employed. They can talk to people that are not currently employed by an NFL team or in the NFL. So Thomas Dimitroff is a name that they can talk to right now because he's not currently employed in the NFL. He's, he left the Falcons in 2020, hasn't been anywhere since. So he is a name to look for, as maybe they can already, start to talk to him already and potentially accelerate that process. So Falcons GM from 2008 to 2020, 6 playoffs, 4 wins, 1 Super Bowl appearance. We all know the infamous 28-3, but still probably out of everybody on this list, if we're being honest, and again, I talk about it, and I talk about it with the, the experience. Out of everybody on this list has probably got the most winning, the best background. I mean, the guy went to a Super Bowl. He has, few division titles, multiple double-digit win seasons. You just break down some of his years. Like I said, 6 playoff appearances, had 4 playoff wins. When you break down his overall record, 113-95, 6 double-digit winning seasons, had 7 winning seasons total, 6 of them being double-digit, went 9-7 in his second year in 2009, made the playoffs in his first year in 2008, went 11-5. You look at some of these years, 13-3, 13-3, 10-6, 11-5, 10-6. Consistent winning seasons, got to a Super Bowl, won 4 playoff games, won 113 games overall in the regular season. By far, probably in terms of accolades, in terms of history, the most decorated that you'll probably get on this list. So Thomas Dimitroff is certainly a name to look for. Now, the one thing with Dimitroff, and maybe you can make a case, is, he's a guy that, he's a guy that hasn't been in the league since 2020. Not that that's ages ago, but it's going to be 2025. How much does he still want to be a GM? Is he still a guy that, is interested, or is that more just throwing a name out there? Only time will tell. But the Jets and Spielman and Tannenbaum can really kind of accelerate this because he's not with anybody right now. So they can talk to him now, potentially. And you've obviously got to wait to officially get interviews, but you can start to compile a list of guys that, would be interested, that maybe you still want to be a GM. Thomas Dimitroff, to me, would be one of your top guys. I mean, he spent over a decade in Atlanta, got to a Super Bowl, made the playoffs 6 times, 7 winning seasons. He did more in a decade in Atlanta than every single Jet general manager and head coach that has walked through this building since 2011. So, I mean, he's done more himself. He's done more than the entire Jets organization over the last decade. And that's crazy because he was from 2008 to 2020. Like, he's been out of the league now for 4 years, and he still did more than what this Jets team has done. He would walk in day one and be the most decorated person that has walked in this building from a front office perspective in a very long time. Dimitroff would. In a very long time. So, he's certainly a name to look for. And a name I would be on board with. Experience, and he's got a lot of success. Some other names. Brandon Brown, assistant GM right now, the Giants. He was a finalist last year for the Chargers job. I know what you're thinking. No way you're talking about somebody from the Giants when Joe Shane and Brian Daboll both might get fired. So Brandon Brown might be available anyway. I doubt it happens, but look, the Giants did make the playoffs in 2022. They've made the playoffs more recently than we have. He was with Howie Roseman with the Eagles from 2017 to 2021. Helped the Giants get to the playoffs in 2022, like I mentioned. I'm not the way things have gone south for the Giants. I don't know if I'd be 100% on board with this. He's also very inexperienced, hasn't been around for a very long time. This is his first real prominent position, not really with a winning organization, so he wouldn't be very high on my board, but he is a name that a lot of people talk about. Like I said, he was the Chargers finalist last year for the Chargers general manager job. So obviously did well enough during the interviews. People obviously feel his track record's good enough to get an opportunity. So we'll see. Now, he does have an interesting connection with the Jets. He was a pro personnel intern in 2012 under Tannenbaum. So interesting connection there with the Jets. Was an intern in 2012. But Brandon Brown was another name. Some others. Ray Farmer, that are listed on The Athletic. Ray Farmer, senior personnel executive of the Rams. He's probably the only former GM that I might stay away from. And I guess you can make the case that, he's learned from his mistakes, whatever. He was the Browns GM from 2014 to 2015. He went 10-22. He was out after 2 years. He hasn't been back since. Now, he's been with the Rams since 2020, won a Super Bowl. Has he learned from it? Maybe. He's been under Les Snead. Les Snead's one of the best general managers in the NFL, has a knack for finding talent in the middle rounds, has been able to keep that team competitive. He's phenomenal. Has he learned from that? Has he learned from Les Snead? Has he learned from what went wrong with the Browns in 2014 and 2015? Now, I know that is still, it's been a while. It's been almost a decade now since he was a general manager for 32 games with the Browns, 10-22 in 2 seasons. But is that also telling that he hasn't gotten an opportunity since? I don't know. Ray Farmer is probably not the top former GM I would look for. Some other names. Mike Greenberg, not the one on ESPN, the other one. Assistant GM right now, the Bucs. He's been with the Bucs for 15 years. Kind of the salary cap guy for Jason Licht, who's their GM. Has seen some success. Still seeing success. He would be interesting because he's kind of seen the Bucs go from Brady to Baker and still stay competitive. Like if he comes in here, and by no means is Rodgers Brady and what he's done here, but it would be similar in terms of moving on from a veteran. Well, Brady retired, but you went all in, except Rodgers never panned out. But moving on from Rodgers, does he like seeing how Tampa's been able to move on from Brady so easily? Would moving on from Rodgers, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud, but he's kind of seen, he would take over it would be a much different situation because the Bucs did winning under Brady, but transitioning from a veteran quarterback to a bridge, a young quarterback, whatever. They found Baker Mayfield. He's worked perfectly. Could he kind of come in here and potentially figure that out, find somebody off the side of the road and it work out here? So he's a name. Mike Martin, director of scouting advancement with the Lions. He's been there for 4 seasons. He was one of Holmes' first hires, very close to Holmes. Many have kind of considered him as Holmes' right-hand man. So I have no problem taking guys. If there would be a team that I would take first-time GMs from, it would be Detroit because they were in a very similar situation to us and they've turned it around. And maybe the football gods bless us and give us like Brad Holmes. Like they give us our version of Brad Holmes. And our version of Brad Holmes drafts or trades or hires our version of Dan Campbell. Maybe that happens. Probably not, but we can dream. Lance Newmark, assistant GM of the Commanders. This is an interesting name just because he was with the Lions, helped their rebuild get off the ground, and then he went to the Commanders last year. And he helped the Commanders hire Adam Peters, or he's helped the Commanders now. He's the assistant GM. But what's interesting is Rick Spielman, who's running this search for the Jets, also helped Washington last year. He helped Washington hire Adam Peters, who then hired Lance Newmark as their assistant GM. So Spielman's kind of got that connection there. I wouldn't be surprised if Newmark just gets an interview just because of the history there, recent history between him and Spielman from last coaching search or last general manager search, and with the Commanders to this year. So that's a name to look for. Final four: John Spytek, assistant GM of the Bucks; Nolan Teasley, assistant GM of the Seahawks; and Josh Williams, director of scouting and football operations for the 49ers. He's been around for a while. Many feel like this could be his chance. There's one other name, Phil Savage, currently the interim here for the Jets. I got a whole notes page. I wrote 3 pages of notes on these guys. All 16 candidates that we've talked about them. I've got 3 pages of notes under each, notes under each of them. It's 3 total pages here. I wrote one thing under Phil Savage. It was bullet point, no. That's how I feel. Nothing against Phil Savage. Not saying he's not capable of doing good somewhere. He's got a very prominent football background, but you've got to blow this whole thing up. You cannot keep anybody from this coaching staff, from this front office in this building. You've got to blow the whole thing up from top down. Anybody that has a position right now that is making football decisions or a part of the decision making, you've got to fire them. Everybody. You've got to do a complete overhaul. If you would just hire Phil Savage, number one, that would just be lazy. It wouldn't work out. And then you would still have a lot of the same people that are in this mess right now. You would have a lot of them staying here. No part of Phil Savage. So nothing against him. It's just they need to blow it up. You can't bring Phil Savage and take the interim tag off of him. No way. No way. So there's my take on Phil Savage. He can be the GM for the next 4 weeks, sign guys to the practice squad, release guys, put guys on IR, all that stuff. But there's no way this guy can be doing a press conference in the middle of January, taking over for the general manager job, because you need to remove the stink from this organization. You need to do a complete 180. And a part of that is moving on from Douglas, moving on from Saleh. It's moving on from his coaching staff. It's moving on from all of Douglas's assistants. Savage was one of them. It's blowing the whole thing up. And blowing the whole thing up means Savage needs to be shown the door as well. He should only be the GM for the next 4 weeks, and then he's out. So that's how I see that. So there's 16 names. Let me know in the comment section down below. Of those names, do you like any of them? Do you not like any of them? Do you got some names that aren't already mentioned? I feel like now, between the episode we did a couple weeks ago where we talked about 6 names, between this episode where we went 10 more names and a couple reports, I feel like now we've covered all of them, yet there is still going to be a surprise or two that nobody sees coming. But 16 names we just talked about, I feel like at least 3 or 4 of these guys have got to get interviewed, right? Some of them, we'll see. So let me know what you think down below. What do you want in your next general manager? I'm a experienced guy. I want a guy that's been there, done that. I want that in my head coach. I want that in my GM. Now, I wouldn't be against pairing a Agnew with a Vrabel. I wouldn't be a big fan of pairing a first-time GM with a first-time head coach. I just don't think that's going to work. Ideally, you have a proven GM with a proven head coach, but I wouldn't be against a first-time GM and maybe a proven head coach, or one or the other. They need somebody proven at one of the 2 positions. They do. I think you can argue what's more important. I think they're both equally as important, because let's be honest, if one's not good, then they're both gone. So they're equally as important. I think you could probably make the case Douglas was probably better at his job than Saleh, but look, they're both gone. They both weren't good enough. So I don't think we can argue which one's more important. Organizations work from the top down. Everything's got to work. So you need to find answers at both. So we'll see. Now, you could have the whole fun scenario of like a Ray Agnew, Aaron Glenn pairing. They're both in Detroit, both know each other. Do they take what they learned in Detroit and apply it here? Aaron Glenn, former Jet, talked about how it would be his dream job 2 years ago. Samini mentioned that. Like, that could maybe be something Jets fans can kind of get behind, like hang your hat on, but I want experience. So let me know what you think in the comments section down below. Appreciate you all so much for tuning in. And until next time, JETS, 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 Jets.